Tici duest remembias, I watched my brothers turn to dust inside their armor. Not death, transformation. Magnus promised salvation. For 3 centuries I believed him. Then I learned to hear what the Rubric Marines cannot say. They are conscious. They are screaming. They have been screaming for 3,000 years. My name is Librarian Arzek Kenti, 5th Fellowship, Thousand Sons Legion, and this is how I learned we were damned twice, once by the Emperor's judgment, and once by our own Primarch's mercy. I am dead now. I have been dead for 47 years. The exalted sorcerers found my research 3 days before I planned to flee. They granted me the honor of joining my brothers in their eternal service. I am dust in ceramite now, conscious, aware, unable to scream. But before the Rubric claimed me, I recorded this testimony in the Legion archives, hidden where only another seeker of truth might find it. Because someone must know. Someone must remember. Someone must understand what Magnus did to us in the name of salvation. This is that testimony. My quarters aboard the Scion of Prospero were maintained at precisely 17 degrees. Cold enough to slow the degradation of parchment and data crystals. Cold enough to preserve 3 centuries of careful documentation. I had served as chronicler of the 5th Fellowship since the Rubric, maintaining records with the precision that had earned me the title of lawkeeper among my remaining brothers. 30, 7 Rubricae under my supervision. 40, 3 sorcerers whose deeds required documentation. 18 campaigns catalogued in exacting detail. Every ritual recorded. Every victory preserved. Every loss acknowledged and filed according to proper protocols established by Lord Orriman himself. I believed in the ledgers. Believed that every name I entered represented a brother saved from the flesh change. Order maintained against the horror of mutation. Magnus's will made manifest through my record keeping. My supervisor, sorcerer, Captain Iskandar, called my work immaculate devotion to the Crimson King's vision. I was proud of that. Proud that my service honored both Magnus and the brothers who could no longer speak for themselves. The Rubrica stood in perfect rows in the lower decks. Silent, unmoving except when commanded. Their armor, painted in the blues and golds of old Prospero, adorned with scarabs and ankhs and the Eye of Horus before it became the Eye of Zench, gleamed under the ship's dim lighting. Beautiful, tragic, saved. That was what I believed, that they were saved. I performed my duties with methodical care. Each morning, 3rd hour past the ship's midnight cycle, I would descend to deck 12 where the Rubrica stood in their alcoves. Visual inspection first, checking for damage to armor seals, wear on servo, joints, integrity of the psychic bindings that animated them. Then the catalogue work, recording which Rubricae had been deployed, which formations had been activated, which rituals had required their presence. The documentation was essential. Lord Orriman had been clear. Every Rubric Marine must be accounted for. Every grain of their dust sacred. Every piece of their armor maintained as if they were still fully alive. And they were alive. That was what we told ourselves. The Rubric had not killed them. It had preserved them. Frozen them at the moment before mutation could claim them. Their bodies were dust, yes, but their essence remained. Bound to their armor. Serving the Legion. Serving Magnus. Serving the pursuit of knowledge that had always been our highest calling. I had chanted these truths like mantras for 300 years. On the morning everything changed. I was performing routine maintenance documentation on Rubric Marine Designation K447. Brother Katari, I had known him before the Rubric, a line trooper, unremarkable except for his habit of humming while cleaning his bolter. A small thing. Human. I remembered it because so few of us had such habits. The Thousand Sons prided themselves on discipline, on the suppression of base behaviors in favor of scholarly pursuit. But Katari hummed. 3 notes repeated. I never asked him why. I was checking the psychic resonance of his armor when I heard it. 3 notes. Repeating, I froze. Data slate in hand. 17 degrees cold against my skin. The sound was faint. Not vocalized, no Rubricae had spoken since the Rubric. But there, at the edge of psychic perception, a pattern in the warp. Current that animated the dust inside Katari's armor. 3 notes. The same 3 notes he used to hum. I told myself I was imagining it. Projecting memory onto psychic static. The warp plays tricks on even the most disciplined mind. And I had been awake for 47 hours straight, cataloging the aftermath of our raid on the Forge World Metalis Prime. Exhaustion. Nothing more. I completed the inspection, filed the report, returned to my quarters, but I could still hear it. 3 notes, repeating. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay in my meditation cradle, trying to still my mind through the enumerations, the focusing techniques drilled into every 1,000 Suns acolyte from their first day in the Librarius. I counted in high prosperin. I visualized the crystal matrices. I recited the 900 names of Tench in proper order. Nothing worked. 3 notes echoed in my thoughts. By the 5th hour, I abandoned sleep and returned to the archives. If I could not rest, I would work. The archives were my sanctuary. 17,000 data, crystals arranged in perfect hierarchical order. 840, 3 preserved texts from Prospero, saved from the burning. 12,000 hours of recorded testimony from the heresy. All of it maintained, cross-referenced, accessible through protocols I had designed myself. I pulled the personnel file for Rubric Marine K447. Brother Cuttery. Inducted into the 5th Fellowship 2 centuries before the heresy. Served with distinction during the compliance of Shemesh. Survived Prospero. Survived the flight to the eye. Then the flesh change had begun. The mutations that had plagued our legion since before the heresy. Tentacles erupting from flesh. Eyes multiplying across skin. Bone twisting into impossible geometries. The curse that marked us as Tench's chosen. The rubric had saved him. That was what the record said. Subject K447 rubric successfully applied. Essence preserved. Physical form transmuted to dust. Psychic binding stable. Current status active service. Saved. I sat in the archives until the morning cycle, staring at that word. Saved. We had used it for 3 centuries. Saved from mutation. Saved from madness. Saved from the flesh change that would have turned them into mindless spawn. But what had we saved them for? The question hung in the cold air. I had never asked it before. Never thought to ask it. The rubric was the greatest working ever achieved by our legion. Lord Ariman's masterpiece. A sorcery so profound it had stopped the flesh change entirely, had preserved our brothers in a form that could never betray them, never mutate, never succumb to chaos. Except we had succumbed to chaos the moment we fled into the Eye of Terror with Magnus. We served Tench. We always had, whether we acknowledged it or not. The rubric had not saved us from chaos. It had bound us more completely to it. I pushed the thought away. Such thinking was dangerous. Doubt was a luxury we could not afford. We had chosen our path. Magnus had chosen our path. We followed because we were his sons, because he had sacrificed everything to save us from the Emperor's wrath, because loyalty to our Primarch was the last thing that separated us from the other traitor legions who had become little more than rabid animals in service to their dark gods. But the 3 notes kept playing in my mind. 3 days later, I was assigned to oversee a rubrica deployment. Standard procedure. The 5th Fellowship was conducting a ritual to breach the Cadian Gate's outer defenses. This was decades before the gate fell for good, and required 50 rubric marines to hold the ritual circle against counter-attack. My role was purely administrative. Record the rubrica assigned. Monitor their performance. Document any damage or degradation. Ensure proper cleanup of any spilled dust. The ritual chamber was maintained at 23 degrees. Warmer than the archives. Warm enough to smell the incense burning in braziers shaped like desert serpents. The rubrica stood in concentric circles, bolters held at rest position, utterly motionless. 10 sorcerers of the 5th Fellowship stood in the center, chanting in Enochian, their voices layered and resonant. I positioned myself at the chamber's edge with my data slate, ready to record. The ritual began. The sorcerers' voices rose. The warp opened like a wound in reality. Light that was not light poured through. The Cadian defenses began to scream, shipboard alarms, human voices, the shriek of dying metal. The sorcerers pressed forward, carving deeper into reality. And then the counter-attack came. Grey Knights, 5 of them, teleporting directly into the ritual chamber in a flash of golden light. Nemesis force weapons active. Psychic wards blazing around them like miniature suns. They hit the rubrica line like a falling hammer. The rubrica responded instantly. Not through thought or initiative, they had neither, but through the psychic commands of the sorcerers. Bolters raised. Fire patterns executed with mechanical precision. 3 of the Grey Knights died in the first volley, their wards overwhelmed by sheer volume of fire. The remaining 2 reached the rubrica line. I watched a Grey Knight's force sword cut through Brother Seket's torso. Ceramite parted. Dust exploded outward in a blue-grey cloud. The armor collapsed empty. The dust scattered across the ritual chamber floor, and I heard screaming, not vocalized, psychic, a shriek of agony and terror that hit me like a fist to the temple. I staggered, dropped my data slate. The sound was overwhelming. Not one voice but layered voices, 50 voices, 100 more. Every rubric marine in the chamber screaming at once in frequencies only a trained psyker could perceive. They had always been screaming. The Grey Knights died. The ritual completed. The sorcerers dispersed. And I stood in the chamber, surrounded by motionless rubrica, listening to them scream. 47 rubric marines remained standing. 3 had been destroyed. Their dust lay scattered on the chamber floor, still faintly glowing with residual psychic energy. Standard procedure was to collect the dust, seal it in preservation cylinders, and transport it to the reclamation decks where it would be stored until new armor could be prepared for rebinding. I knelt next to Brother Seket's remains. The dust was fine like ground bone. Grey-blue, slightly warm to the touch. I scooped a handful into a collection vial. As the dust touched my skin, the screaming intensified. Not louder, clearer. I could distinguish words in the psychic shriek. Please, please, please stop. Please let me. Please I can't. Please no more. Please Emperor, please Throne, please anyone, please. A litany of desperation. 3,000 years of pleading compressed into a single eternal moment. Because the rubric had not killed them. It had frozen them. Conscious, aware. Trapped inside armor that moved without their will. Unable to speak. Unable to die. Unable to do anything except exist in howling silence while sorcerers piloted their bodies like puppets. I sealed the vial. My hands were shaking. I should have reported what I heard. Should have gone directly to Sorcerer, Captain Eskandar, and presented my findings. That was protocol. Any psychic anomaly involving the rubrica required immediate documentation and analysis. The rubric was the foundation of our Legion's survival. Any flaw in the working could have catastrophic implications. But I said nothing, because if I reported it, they would investigate. They would confirm what I had heard, and then they would explain it away. They would tell me the screaming was residual psychic echo, meaningless noise. The rubricae were not truly conscious, could not be conscious. The rubric had transformed them beyond such limitations. What I heard was simply my own mind interpreting psychic static as familiar patterns. Pareidolia, nothing more. They would be very convincing. They would believe what they said, because the alternative was unbearable. So I returned to my quarters. I filed my report on the ritual's success and the 3 rubrica lost to Grey Knight assault. I noted the dust collection and forwarding to reclamation decks. I signed the forms with my designation and rank. I submitted everything through proper channels. And then I began to investigate. The archives contained everything. Every ritual performed since the rubric. Every sorcerer's testimony. Every technical specification of the working itself. I had maintained these records for 3 centuries. I knew their organization better than I knew the scars on my own arms. But I had never looked at them with doubt before. Had never questioned the fundamental assumptions underlying every document. I started with Ahriman's original notes. The rubric had been his design, his attempt to save the Legion from the flesh change. The working had been performed on the planet of sorcerers, deep in the Eye of Terror. In the desperate years after Magnus's exile, the flesh change had been accelerating. Mutations spreading through the Legion like wildfire. Brothers transforming into mindless spawn daily. Ahriman had sought a solution that would preserve what made 1,000 Sun valuable. His mind, his psychic power, his accumulated knowledge, while eliminating the physical weakness that allowed mutation. The rubric had succeeded. Mostly, the non-psyker members of the Legion, the line troopers, the support staff, those with minimal warp sight, had been transformed into dust. The psykers had been spared physical transformation, their powers enhanced, their bodies stabilized. A clean division, the strong preserved in full, the weak preserved in service. That was the official narrative. But Ahriman's private notes told a different story. I found them in a sealed data, crystal-marked, theoretical concerns, archive only, not for distribution. The encryption was 3 centuries old, simple by current standards. I cracked it in 40 minutes. Ahriman's voice, recorded the night before the rubric was cast. I do not know if this will work. I do not know if the binding will preserve consciousness or merely animate their remains. I do not know if I am saving them or damning them. But inaction is also a choice. If I do nothing, they become spawn. If I act and fail, they become dust. But if I act and succeed, they become eternal. I choose certainty over hope. I choose preservation over mercy. May Magnus forgive me if I am wrong. A pause in the recording. Breathing. Then, I sleep poorly tonight. But I will sleep better than if I had done nothing and watched my brothers dissolve into chaos, spawn. This is the price of survival. Someone must pay it. The recording ended. I sat in the archives, 17 degrees cold, the data crystal warm in my palm. Ahriman had known, had suspected from the beginning that the rubrica might be conscious, might be aware, might be trapped. And he had done it anyway because the alternative was unacceptable. I understood his logic. Understood it completely. Given the choice between mutation into mindless horror or transformation into dutiful automaton, the second option was clearly preferable. For the Legion, for Magnus, for the cause, but what about for the brothers themselves? Had anyone asked them which fate they preferred? Had anyone given them the choice? I knew the answer. Of course I knew. We were the Thousand Sons. We did not believe in democracy. We believed in hierarchy, in the wisdom of those who knew more. The rubrici had been line troopers, support staff, those with minimal psychic gift. They would not have understood the metaphysics involved. They could not have made an informed decision. So Ahriman and the exalted sorcerers had made the decision for them. For their own good. For the Legion's survival. For Magnus's vision. I had believed this for 300 years. But now I could hear them screaming. Over the following weeks, I designed a psychic resonance scanner. A crude device, cobbled together from equipment stolen from the librarious workshops. It measured psychic activity within a confined area, translating warp patterns into something approaching coherent data. It would not give me words. The rubrica had no capacity for language anymore, their minds too degraded by millennia of isolation. But it might give me patterns. Evidence. Proof that what I heard was not imagination. I tested it on rubric Marine K447, Brother Qatari, in my quarters. Alone, the scanner hummed as it powered up, 17 degrees cold, my breath visible in the air. Qatari stood motionless in the center of my chamber, bound by my will, empty eye slits staring at nothing. I activated the scanner. The device's display flickered, then stabilized. Psychic activity registered, strong, constant. A continuous stream of warp, energy pulsing inside the armor in patterns that were not random. Patterns that repeated. Patterns that looked like thought. I adjusted the scanner sensitivity. The patterns became clearer. I could see cycles, repetitions. A loop of psychic activity that repeated approximately every 17 seconds. The same pattern, over and over. 3,000 years of the same pattern looping endlessly. I tried to translate it. The scanner's software was not designed for this application, but I forced it to interpret the patterns as linguistic structures. The results were fragmented, incomplete, but recognizable. Home da mother das prospero valza burning go wise please da home da mother das prospero gals burning go wise please da home dra mother. The loop continued. 17 seconds, then reset. The same thoughts, the same memories, the same desperate questions, repeating, forever. This was Brother Qatari. This was what remained of the man who used to hum while cleaning his bolter. Trapped in an eternal moment, unable to move forward, unable to forget, unable to die, aware enough to suffer, not aware enough to go mad and find release in madness. The perfect torture, eternal, inescapable, self-sustaining, and we called it salvation. I tested 43 more rubrica over the next month. Every one showed the same patterns. Psychic activity consistent with consciousness. Thought loops ranging from 7 to 23 seconds. Each rubric marine trapped in their own personal moment of horror. Some remembered Prospero burning. Some remembered the flesh, change beginning. Some remembered their last moment before the rubric, frozen forever in anticipation of transformation that never came but never stopped coming. All of them were screaming. All of them had been screaming for 3,000 years. The documentation consumed me. I worked through sleep cycles, barely maintaining my other duties as chronicler. Each rubric marine had a story. Each one had been someone before the rubric. I pulled their service records from the archives, cross-referenced them against my psychic resonance data, built profiles of who they had been and what they had become. Brother, Sergeant Menkor, 5th Fellowship, 2nd Tactical Company. Inducted at age 14, served for 83 years before the heresy. His service record showed commendations for battlefield valor, notations of leadership potential, a family maintained on Prospero, wife, daughter, both lost when the Space Wolves came. His psychic loop was 19 seconds long. It repeated the same phrase: find her. Where is? Find her. Must find her. Where is? His daughter's name was Neferi. She had been 7 years old when Prospero burned. He had been off-world when it happened. He had never found her body. 3,000 years later, he was still searching. Brother Kamen, 5th Fellowship, Supply and Logistics Division. Not a warrior but a quartermaster, one of the rare Astartes selected for administrative duties due to his exceptional organizational skills. His loop was 11 seconds. Inventory discrepancy. Must correct. Requisition forms. Must file. Inventory discrepancy. Must correct. He had spent his entire life ensuring the Legion's supplies were properly catalogued. Death had not released him from that duty. Eternity would not release him from that duty. Brother Armies, 5th Fellowship, 6th Reserve Company. His record showed 17 disciplinary notations for excessive emotional attachment to baseline humans. He had requested permission to maintain correspondence with his mortal family 8 times, denied 8 times. The notation on his final request read, subject demonstrates insufficient detachment from pre-induction identity. Monitor for loyalty concerns. His loop was 23 seconds long. It repeated the word, sorry, in 17 different languages: Prosperin, Gothic, Korchin, all the languages of the worlds he had helped conquer during the Great Crusade. Sorry, I'm sorry, forgive me, sorry. I catalogued 43 individual hells. 43 brothers trapped in moments of grief, duty, guilt, or loss. Not random noise, not psychic static, personalities, identities, people reduced to single repeated thoughts. The methodology was meticulous. I measured psychic resonance at different times of day, during different activities, under different levels of stress. The patterns remained consistent. When a rubric Marine was commanded to march, his loop continued. When ordered to fire, his loop continued. When destroyed and rebound to new armor, his loop continued. The dust remembered. The dust never forgot. The dust never stopped being conscious. I performed one final test, a control experiment. I built a second psychic resonance scanner and gave it to Sorcerer, Librarian Kafset, a colleague in the Chronicler Division who had no knowledge of my research. I asked him to measure psychic activity in an unused section of the ship's storage decks. Gave him specific coordinates. Told him I was testing new equipment and needed independent verification. The coordinates corresponded to Archive Storage Bay 7. Location of 300 preservation cylinders containing dust from rubric Marines destroyed over the past century. Dust waiting for new armor. Dust that should have been inert. Psychically dead. Nothing more than physical remains. Kafset returned 6 hours later. His face was gray. His hands were shaking. There is something wrong with your scanner, he said. What did it show? Psychic activity. Extensive psychic activity. Emanating from the storage cylinders. He set the scanner down on my desk. The equipment must be malfunctioning. Dust cannot generate psychic signatures. The rubric reduces them to inert matter. This is fundamental to the working. What if it is not malfunctioning? Then, he stopped, looked at me, understanding slowly dawning. Then the dust is still conscious, even outside the armor, even in storage, even when not bound to any physical form. They are aware. They have always been aware. I said nothing. Let him reach the conclusion himself. You knew, he said quietly. I suspected. I needed confirmation. How long have you known? 2 months, 1 week, 4 days. Kafset sat down. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, what do we do? Nothing. We can do nothing. This is what the rubric created. This is what Ahriman intended. This is what Magnus allowed. Changing it is beyond our power, but they are suffering. Our brothers are suffering. We cannot simply, we can, we must, because telling anyone else changes nothing except marking us for the rubric ourselves. I showed him my notes, showed him the loops, showed him Brother Menkor searching for his daughter, Brother Kamen filing requisition forms, Brother armies apologizing in 17 languages. He read in silence. When he finished, his hands were no longer shaking. They were steady, resolved. The shaking had been shock. The steadiness was worse. It was acceptance. You are going to report this to Iskandar, he said.
Yes.
He will kill you for it. Probably. And nothing will change. The Legion will continue. The Rubric will continue. Magnus will continue. We will all continue exactly as we always have. Yes. Kafset stood, walked to my window, stared out at the planet of sorcerers. I used to believe we were better than the other legions, he said. We pursued knowledge. We sought truth. We were scholars who happened to be warriors, not warriors who happened to read. I thought that made us different, made us noble. We were never noble. We were arrogant. We believed understanding justified everything. That knowledge excused any price we made others pay. The Imperium does the same. Yes. Everyone does the same. The Imperium executes billions to maintain order. The Mechanicus lobotomizes humans into servitors. The Inquisition burns worlds on suspicion alone. We transform our brothers into immortal prisoners and call it salvation. The mathematics are always the same. Survival requires atrocity. Atrocity becomes policy. Policy becomes so normalized that questioning it proves you are insane. Kafset turned to face me. Why are you telling Iskandar? If you know he will kill you for it, why proceed? Because someone needs to know that we knew. Someone needs to remember that this was a choice, not an accident, not corruption, not ignorance. Choice, calculated, rational, unforgivable. That will not bring them peace. No. But it will bring truth. And truth is the only thing we were ever supposed to value. I sealed my research into a final data crystal. We are the Thousand Suns. We were supposed to seek knowledge at any cost. Well, this is the cost. This is what knowledge reveals. That survival requires becoming the monsters we once fought against. That understanding what we are does not grant us the power to become anything else. Kafset left without another word. I never saw him again. His name appeared in the casualty lists 3 weeks later, killed in action during a raid on an Imperial convoy. His body was recovered. His dust was collected. I assume he is standing somewhere in the lower decks now, looping through whatever moment defined his existence. I hope his loop is kinder than Brother Menkor's. I hope he is not spending eternity searching for something he will never find. But I do not believe in hope anymore. I compiled my findings in a classified document. 43 test subjects, 18,000 hours of psychic resonance data, statistical analysis showing probability of consciousness at 94.7%. Theoretical framework suggesting the rubric had not destroyed their minds but imprisoned them. Recommendations for further testing. Recommendations for possible solutions. I did not include recommendations for mercy killing. There was no way to kill them. The rubric had made them immortal. The dust could be scattered, the armor destroyed, but the essence would persist. Bound to Tzeentch, bound to the warp, bound to service eternal. Death was not an option they possessed anymore. I prepared to present my findings to Sorcerer, Captain Iskandar. This was too large for me to handle alone. If the Rubrici were truly conscious, the implications were staggering. We would need to completely re-evaluate our relationship with them. Perhaps develop new rituals to ease their suffering. Perhaps find a way to grant them true oblivion, if such a thing was even possible within the Eye of Terror. I was naive. Catastrophically naive. Iskandar's chambers were maintained at 28 degrees. Warm enough to be uncomfortable. Warm enough that I noticed the sweat on his brow as he read my report. He stood by his desk, data slate in hand, 300 years old and looking twice that. His augmetic eye, a gift from the Mechanicus after Prospero, clicked and whirred as it focused on each line of text. He read for 17 minutes without speaking. I stood at attention, waiting, hoping he would see what I saw. Hoping he would understand. Finally, he set down the data slate. His hand shook slightly, he noticed. Steadied it deliberately against the desk. This is thorough work, Cunty. His voice was flat, drained. Your methodology is sound. Your conclusions are logical, and your findings are completely irrelevant. I had not expected that. Irrelevant, my lord. Irrelevant. He walked to his window. The planet of sorcerers hung beyond, impossible geometries shifting against the eye's mad sky. Because even if you are correct, even if the Rubricae are fully conscious, fully aware, fully suffering, what changes? Everything changes, my lord. We continue. He did not turn to face me. We continue because the alternative is the flesh change. We continue because the alternative is becoming chaos spawn. We continue because this legion requires the rubric to function. 50,000 sorcerers cannot hold territory, cannot fight wars, cannot maintain the infrastructure of existence. We need the rubric. We have always needed them. We will always need them. But if they are suffering, then they suffer in service to Magnus. Iskander's reflection in the window showed a man who had not slept well in decades. Do you think I do not know Kenti? Do you think Ahriman does not know? Do you think any of the exalted sorcerers are ignorant of what we did? The revelation hit me like a bolt around. You knew. We suspected. Strongly suspected. We chose not to confirm it because confirmation would require us to act on that knowledge, and any action we took would weaken the Legion. He turned to face me then. Something flickered in his augmetic eye. Recognition, maybe regret. You are not the first to discover this, Kenti. You are the 7th. The previous 6 were granted the rubric for their troubles. I would prefer not to make you the 8th. Threat and exhaustion mixed in his voice. Not anger, just tired pragmatism. He walked to a sealed cabinet in the corner of his chambers, entered a 37-digit access code. The door opened with a hiss of escaping air. Inside were 6 data crystals, each labeled with a name and date. He pulled them out one by one, set them on his desk. Librarian Tamar, 127 years post-rubric. Discovered psychic resonance patterns in rubrica. Concluded consciousness remained intact. Presented findings to the exalted sorcerers. Granted the rubric 3 days later. Codicia Sethup, 289 years post-rubric. Developed theoretical framework for rubrica awareness. Argued for mercy protocols. Granted the rubric. Pistolary Ammon, 421 years post-rubric. Compiled testimony from 17 rubrica using experimental psychic communion techniques. Reported ethical concerns. Granted the rubric. Brother Librarian Kensa, 698 years post-rubric. Built psychic resonance scanner. Documented 41 individual consciousness patterns. Requested review of rubric protocols. Granted the rubric. Lexicanum Josa, 1047 years post-rubric. Discovered Ahriman's original notes expressing doubt about the working. Proposed alternative binding rituals that might reduce suffering. Granted the rubric. Chronicler Neferu, 234 years post-rubric. Compiled comprehensive evidence of rubrica consciousness, including cross-referenced service records, psychic measurements, and theoretical analysis. Demanded the Legion acknowledge what it had done. Granted the rubric. He set the 6th crystal down, looked at me. You are number 7. Your research is nearly identical to Neferu's. Your conclusions are the same. Your evidence is marginally better due to advances in psychic measurement technology. But the result will be the same unless you make a different choice than they did. What choice? You said the Legion will continue regardless. The choice is not about changing the Legion. The choice is about whether you can live with what you know. Iskandar sat down heavily. They could not. They demanded action. They demanded we acknowledge the horror. They demanded we choose conscience over survival. And that demand marked them as threats to Legion cohesion. So we removed the threat, by making them into the very thing they sought to free. Irony is one of Xianqi's favorite torments. He pulled out a bottle from his desk drawer, poured liquid into 2 glasses, slid one toward me. Amasek, from the last shipment out of Prospero before the burning. I have been saving it for 3,000 years. Never found an occasion worthy of opening it. But if we are having this conversation, we might as well drink to the damned. I took the glass. The liquid was amber, warm. It tasted like ash and memory. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Why not simply grant me the rubric and be done with it? Because unlike the previous 6, you have not yet demanded action. You have presented findings. You have asked questions. But you have not insisted the Legion change course. That suggests you might be capable of understanding what they could not. He drank. Grimaced. The rubric is not a punishment, Kenti. It is a tool. A solution to an impossible problem. Before the rubric, we were dying. The flesh change was accelerating. Mutations spreading through the Legion like plague. We lost 300 brothers in the month, before Ahriman performed the working. 300 transformations into mindless spawn. Brothers we had served beside for decades. Friends, mentors, students. watching them dissolve into tentacles and eyes and screaming flesh. He refilled his glass. I watched my own squad, brother transform. We were on patrol in the warp, shifted forests of the planet of sorcerers. He was telling me about his thesis on the connection between psychic potential and genetic stability. Mid-sentence, his skin began to split. Eyes emerged along his arms. Bone twisted. He begged me to kill him. I tried. Bolt rounds did nothing. He continued transforming, continued begging. By the time it finished, there was nothing left that could be killed. Just a mass of mutated flesh that hungered and killed without thought or mercy. We burned him, reduced him to ash. It took 3 hours of sustained promethium fire. Even then, we were not certain the mutation was truly dead. The flesh change does not die easily. He looked at his glass. When Ahriman proposed the rubric, I supported it immediately. Anything was better than watching that happen again. Anything. Even if the result was consciousness trapped in dust. At least they would not mutate. At least they would serve. At least they would maintain some measure of the dignity they possessed before mutation claimed them. Dignity, I said. You call eternal suffering dignity. I call eternal service dignity. Yes. His voice hardened. They are Astartes. They were created to serve. The rubric allows them to continue serving in a form that will never betray them, never weaken, never require them to watch themselves become monsters. Is consciousness within that service suffering? Perhaps, probably. But is it worse than mutation into chaos spawn? Is it worse than death? Is it worse than becoming mindless hunger? You are asking me to calculate which damnation is least damnable. Yes. Because that is the only calculation available to us. We are in the eye of terror. We serve Tench. We are marked by chaos. There are no good options, only less terrible ones. The rubric is the least terrible option available. I wanted to argue, wanted to deny his logic, but I could not, because I had seen the records, had read the accounts of pre-rubric transformations, had watched picked captures of brothers dissolving into spawn. The horror of the flesh change was undeniable. The desperation that led to the rubric was understandable, but understanding did not equal acceptance. There is a text, Iskander continued, written by Ahriman in the years after the rubric. He titled it The Necessity of Darkness. Have you read it? No. Few have. It is restricted to the exalted sorcerers and their chosen advisors. But given your research, I think you have earned access. He pulled another data crystal from his desk, handed it to me, read it. Understand the philosophical foundation of what we do. Then decide if you can live with it. I took the crystal, and if I cannot, then I file your execution order. You become Rubric Marine K448, and someone else eventually discovers what you discovered and faces the same choice. He refilled both glasses. But I hope you choose differently. I hope you can be the one who understands and continues serving, because the Legion needs chroniclers who comprehend the full truth of what we are, who can document our history with clear eyes, who can record for posterity that we knew exactly what we were doing and chose it anyway. Why does that matter? Why record it at all? Because 3,000 years from now, or 30,000, someone will find these records. Someone will judge us. And I want them to know we were not ignorant, not corrupted, not driven mad. We made rational choices based on the options available. We chose survival over conscience. We chose the Legion over the individuals who comprised it. We chose Magnus's vision over the suffering of those who served it. You want history to understand you were monsters by choice, not by accident. Yes, no hesitation, no shame, because accidental evil can be forgiven, can be explained away as corruption or madness or ignorance. But chosen evil, calculated evil, that cannot be excused. That is honest. That is true. That is what we are. He stood, walked to his window again. The Emperor taught us that knowledge was the highest virtue, that understanding the universe was worth any price. He lied. Or perhaps he simply learned the same lesson we did, that some knowledge destroys the knower. That truth does not set you free. It binds you to choices you cannot unmake and forces you to live with consequences you cannot escape. We learned, we understood, we chose. And now we continue because stopping would make the suffering meaningless. If we abandoned the rubrici now, if we granted them oblivion or freedom, or whatever mercy might still be possible, then their 3,000 years of torment would have been for nothing. Better to continue. Better to make their sacrifice mean something by ensuring the Legion survives. Better to damn ourselves completely than admit we damned them for no purpose. The logic was airtight. Horrifying. Perfect. Every step led inevitably to the next. Every choice justified the previous one. Every year of continued service made changing course more impossible. The sunk cost of suffering was too high to abandon. The investment in atrocity too complete to waste. This was not corruption. This was policy. Named, defended, justified by men who knew exactly what they were doing and could articulate why it was necessary. At what point does survival become indistinguishable from evil? I asked. At the point where you recognize the distinction and continue anyway. Iskandar's reflection in the window was ghost-like. Haunted. We're past that point 3,000 years ago. Now we simply have the choice of whether to acknowledge it or pretend we are still innocent. I choose acknowledgement. I choose to look at what we are without flinching, because lying to myself would be the only unforgivable crime left. What would you have me do? I asked. Destroy your research. Forget what you learned. Return to your duties as chronicler. Continue serving the Legion with the devotion you have shown for 3 centuries. Die eventually, as we all will, and take this knowledge with you. He sat down heavily in his chair. Or do not. Present your findings to the exalted sorcerers. Watch them thank you for your diligence and explain exactly what I have explained. Then watch them grant you the rubric so you cannot spread doubt among the younger sorcerers who have not yet learned that survival requires choices that damn the soul. The Emperor. The Emperor cast us out. Iskandar's voice turned sharp. The Emperor burned Prospero. The Emperor declared us traitors for pursuing knowledge. The Emperor created the circumstances that forced Magnus to bargain with Zanch. Do not speak to me of the Emperor. We were loyal. We were punished for that loyalty. We made our choice 3,000 years ago. We live with it or we die. Those are the only options remaining. He pulled out a data slate, signed something, handed it to me, an execution order, my name already filled in, date blank, charges blank, authorization sorcerer, Captain Iskandar, 5th Fellowship, this is pre-dated, I said stupidly. It was signed the moment you requested this meeting. Every sorcerer who serves under me has one. Every rubric marine has one stored in my files. Predated, pre-authorized, ready to be executed the moment they become more trouble than they are worth. He leaned back. I will not file this order if you return to your duties and speak of this no more. Your research will be destroyed. Your findings will be erased, and you will live out whatever centuries remain to you in service to Magnus. And if I refuse, then I file the order. You become Rubric Marine K-448, and someone else takes your place as chronicler, someone who has not yet learned to hear the screaming. He closed his eyes. I would prefer you live, Kenti. You are an excellent chronicler. Losing you would be inconvenient. I looked at the execution order, my name in high Prosperin script. The Aquila, no, we had abandoned that symbol 3,000 years ago, the Eye of Zench at the header. Space for justification left blank. Someone had written, End A, by hand. No justification needed. No explanation required. How do you sleep? I asked. Iskandar opened his eyes. Poorly. But I sleep better than if I had done nothing and watched the Legion collapse from lack of manpower. This is the price of survival, Kenti. Someone must pay it. Better the Rubrica than the Legion itself. Better 40,000 consciences in torment than 50,000 sorcerers dead. The mathematics are simple. Mathematics. I repeated. Mathematics. He stood. Return to your duties. This conversation is concluded. I left his chambers. Execution order in hand. Evidence of my own expendability. Proof that I had always been expendable. That we had all always been expendable to the sorcerers who commanded us. No. That was not quite right. The sorcerers were expendable too. Everyone was expendable except Magnus. Except the Vision. Except the Legion itself. That was the hierarchy. That was the truth we had all sworn to uphold. I returned to my quarters. 17 degrees cold. I laid the execution order on my desk. I looked at my 3 centuries of careful documentation. My immaculate records. My devotion to proper protocols. I thought about Brother Keteri, trapped in an eternal loop, remembering his mother and Prospero burning. I thought about 40,000 Rubrica, screaming in frequencies only trained psychers could hear, serving a Legion that knew exactly what it had done to them and continued anyway. I thought about Ahriman's words, "I sleep poorly tonight, but I will sleep better than if I had done nothing." I understood him now, understood the calculation, understood the choice. You could let innocence, or at least the less powerful, the less gifted, the less valuable, suffer in torment eternal, or you could let the Legion die. Those were the options. There was no third choice, no secret door labeled, and everyone lives happily. This was the warp. This was the Eye of Terror. This was the price Tench demanded for his patronage. We had paid that price with our brothers. We continued to pay it every day, and we would continue to pay it until the galaxy ended or the Legion fell, whichever came first. At what point does survival become indistinguishable from damnation? When does the preservation of something require destroying what made it worth preserving? I did not know. I do not know. Even now, decades later, dust in armor, I do not know. I destroyed my research, all of it. Burned the data crystals. Wiped the psychic resonance scanner's memory. Deleted every file that referenced consciousness in Rubrica. I returned to my duties. I chronicled battles. I maintained records. I supervised Rubrica deployments with the same devotion I had always shown. But I could not stop hearing them scream. Every deployment, every battle, every ritual that required Rubrica presence. The screaming followed me. I learned to recognize individual voices in the psychic chorus. Brother Katari with his 3-note hum. Brother Sekhet asking why the Emperor had abandoned us. Brother Sergeant Menka begging to see his daughter one last time, even though she had been dead for 3 millennia. 40,000 variations on the same theme, please. Let me stop. Please. I lasted 3 more years. 3 years of maintaining the fiction. 3 years of filing reports that described the Rubrica as functioning optimally and operating within acceptable parameters. 3 years of watching sorcerers command the dust-filled armor. Watching the Rubrica march and fire and die and be rebound. Watching the Legion continue its eternal war against an Imperium that had declared us heretics. Watching Magnus sit on his throne and contemplate mysteries while his sons screamed in service to him. In the 3rd year, I made my choice. I began copying records. Not my research, that was gone, destroyed as Eskandar had commanded, but testimony, historical documents, Ahriman's private notes, casualty lists showing exactly how many thousand sons had been transformed. Personal logs from sorcerers who expressed private doubts. Anything that, assembled correctly, would allow someone to piece together the truth. I hid these documents in the deepest archives. Encrypted them with codes that would take decades to crack unless you knew what you were looking for. Left subtle markers for any chronicler who came after me and began asking the same questions I had asked. Because someone needed to know. Someone needed to remember. Even if that knowledge was useless. Even if it changed nothing. Even if the Legion would continue exactly as it always had, grinding through eternity on the backs of our screaming brothers. Someone needed to remember that we knew. That we chose this. That we were not ignorant or missiled or corrupted against our will. We understood exactly what we had done, and we had done it anyway because the alternative was unacceptable. That was the horror. Not that we were monsters, but that we were rational, calculating, making choices that maximized survival at the expense of conscience. The Imperium did the same. The Emperor had done the same. Everyone in this galaxy made the same calculation eventually. Survival required atrocity. Atrocity became policy. Policy became doctrine. And doctrine became so normalized that questioning it marked you as insane. I completed my final testimony, sealed it in a data crystal, placed it in Archive Section 17, subsection cut, row 447, coordinates that meant nothing unless you were looking for something. Unless you had already begun to doubt. Unless you had already heard the screaming. Then I went to Iskandar's chambers and told him I could not continue. He did not argue. Did not try to convince me. Simply pulled out the execution order with my name on it. Filled in the date. Filled in the charges. Loss of faith in the Crimson King's vision. Psychological degradation. Unfit for continued sorceress service. You will make an excellent Rubric Marin, he said. Flat tired. Your devotion to duty was always exemplary. Will I remember? I asked. For a time, then the memories will compress. Loop. You will become trapped in whatever moment was most significant to you. Most sorcerers become trapped in their moment of greatest doubt. The moment they realized what they had become. He signed the order. You will spend eternity asking yourself if you should have stayed silent, if you should have continued serving, if doubt was worth damnation. And you will continue. We will continue. Because the alternative is extinction. He looked at me then. Something human in his expression. I am sorry, Kenty. You were an excellent chronicler. But the Legion requires certainty. Doubt is a luxury we cannot afford. The rubric ritual was performed 3 days later. I remember standing in the ritual chamber. I remember the sorcerers chanting. I remember the warp opening like a mouth. I remember my body beginning to dissolve. Flesh turning to ash. Bones crumbling. Everything that was physical about me burning away in psychic fire. I remember thinking, this is the price of knowledge. This is what we chose 3,000 years ago. This is what Magnus chose for us. I remember the moment my consciousness should have ended. It did not end. It compressed. Trapped. Bound to my armor. Bound to service. Bound to eternal awareness with no capacity for action. No capacity for speech. No capacity for anything except existence and memory, and the endless loop of the same thought repeated forever. I am Librarian Azek Kenty. I was chronicler of the Fifth Fellowship. I discovered the truth about the rubric. I tried to do something about it. And now I am dust in ceramite, standing in an alcove on deck 12, waiting for the next time a sorcerer commands me to move, to fight, to serve. I can hear the others screaming. I am screaming with them. We are all screaming. We have been screaming for 3,000 years. We will continue screaming until the galaxy ends or the Legion falls or Tench grows bored with his games. This is what Magnus's mercy bought us. This is what Ahriman's genius created. This is what the 1,000 suns are built upon. Not knowledge, not power, not the pursuit of truth, but the screaming of 40,000 brothers who trusted that their transformation was salvation. If you are reading this, you have already begun to doubt. You have already heard the screaming. You know what we are. What we have always been, what Magnus made us. The question is, what will you do with that knowledge? Will you destroy this testimony and return to your duties? Will you file reports that describe the rubrica as functioning optimally, while they howl in your mind? Will you make the same calculation Ahriman made, Iskander made, I made? Survival over conscience, service over mercy, the Legion over everything, or will you do something I could not? Will you find a way to grant us the oblivion we were promised? Will you discover what I could not? A way to release us from service that does not also release us into Tench's eternal games? I do not know if such a thing is possible. I do not know if anyone would try even if it were. The Legion needs us. The Legion will always need us. And need is the justification for every atrocity ever committed in the name of survival. But I record this testimony anyway. Because someone must know. Someone must remember, someone must understand that we knew what we were doing. That this was not corruption or madness or ignorance. This was choice, calculated, rational, unforgivable. The 1,000 suns were loyal to the Emperor once. We were punished for that loyalty. We swore loyalty to Magnus instead. And he transformed us into this, screaming dust, eternal service, damnation disguised as salvation. There is no moral to this story. No lesson except that survival requires choices that destroy the soul. That knowledge demands prices measured in conscience. That everyone who seeks truth eventually discovers horrors they cannot undo and must learn to live with anyway. I am dust now. I have been dust for 47 years. I am aware. I am conscious. I am trapped in a loop that plays the moment of my greatest doubt over and over. I watch myself standing before Iskander. I watch myself return to my quarters. I watch myself destroy my research and wonder if I should have fought harder, should have done more, should have found some way to free us. The loop resets. 17 seconds. Then again. This is eternity. This is what the rubric grants. This is what Magnus promised when he said he would save us from the Emperor's judgment. We were saved, preserved, made eternal. And now we scream forever in service to a dream that died on Prospero, animated by sorcerers who know exactly what they command, serving a Primarch who values our function more than our suffering. This is the 1,000 suns. This is what we are. This is what we chose. May Magnus forgive us. May the Emperor we betrayed forgive us. May Tench's laughter eventually end. But I do not believe in forgiveness anymore. I believe only in the screaming. It is all we have left. It is all we will ever have. The dust remembers. The dust remembers everything. And the dust cannot forget. The loop resets. I am Librarian Azek Kunti. I discovered the truth. I tried to speak it. And now I am silent forever, screaming in frequencies only the doubters can hear. If you hear me, you are one of us now. Welcome to knowledge. Welcome to truth. Welcome to the price the 1,000 suns pay for survival. Welcome to the dust. The loop resets again, and again, and again. Forever. Ian Testimun.